Director of Investigations and Security with the Ohio Lottery Commission. I know you have heard from members of our executive management team on Ohio Lottery's responsible gambling program and the Keep It Fun campaign over the course of this conference. But it is members of our investigation and security team that are actually on the ground at the racinos taking the enrollment applications for the Ohio Voluntary Exclusion Program. We recognize that the self-exclusion program is an important program for an individual to take control of their gambling behavior. It is critical for our team to be empathetic and listen when somebody is taking control and signing up for this program. It is also critical for our team to articulate the terms of the agreement that they are signing, including the exclusion from the 11 state-regulated gaming properties for a 1-year, 5-year, or even a lifetime term, and to know the consequences if they violate this agreement with possible trespassing charges. I am with you today not only as a representative of the Ohio Lottery and a member of the National Council on Problem Gambling, but as a retired Ohio State Highway Patrol trooper and a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps. These are tough times for the women and men of our military that are serving our country and our military veterans. This session will shed some light on the prevalence of gambling in the military. Now it is my honor to introduce our next speakers. Nick Ramirez is a United States Army veteran, a former member of the peer support for the VA Gambling Treatment Program, and is currently an outreach prevention specialist. Nick is an active member of the National Council on Problem Gambling and the Cuyahoga Problem Gambling Coalition. Robert Walmsley is a retired naval officer with 20 years of compliance experience in the healthcare and gaming industry. Robert has been the Director of Compliance at the Cincinnati Casino since opening in 2012, focusing on gaming, non-gaming, and responsible gaming. Prior to working in the gaming industry, Robert worked at the Christ Hospital and other hospital systems in Washington and Idaho after retiring from the U.S. Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Ramirez and Robert Walmsley.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, guys.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us and for that great introduction. And I'll start, all three of you. Thank you for your service to our country and for your service to the field as well, to the problem gambling field, and your continued support and energy in all that we do. Representing 3 branches today, the Marines, Army, and Navy, so that's fantastic as well. We're going to just start with, I just wanted, I guess I'll go to Nick first and then to Robert, just a little bit more introduction just for each of you personally, to say a little bit more just about who you are, and then your service and kind of introduction into our field.
Okay, so I am a Cleveland native, born and raised. I joined the military probably, well, it was about 2006, and I served until about 2012. And when I came home, I didn't quite land on my feet, and I landed in the care of the Cleveland VA Medical Center. And I worked my butt off to really integrate back into the community and implement everything that they taught me. And when I did that, they said, hey, we have these peer support jobs, and I had heard about them. And I applied, and I just, was lucky enough to really land in a really great place, working down there with Heather and the Addictions Recovery Center. And it was an amazing time of education and awareness, growing awareness for myself and the people around me. Because when you're growing, you kind of grow with the people around you, and it was amazing. And I worked there for about almost 5 years. And then I stepped away to take some time for myself. And now I'm at Recovery Resources, like Michael had said, working as an outreach prevention specialist. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Nick. And Robert?
Sure.
Morning, Mike. Hey, morning, Brother Nick and Brother Mike Black. That introduction, Nick and I have talked a little bit before. And I say brother specifically because no matter what we do outside of the military, we're always still brothers in arms, whether you were in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. Whenever I do these type of talks, and I talk to Army, Coast Guard, Air Force, we joke around a lot about that. Can never hit the Marine Corps. So nice to meet you, Mr. Black. They're always great. So I'm a retired naval officer. I lucky enough to get involved in this, as you kind of heard last week when I talked, or 2 weeks ago, after I retired from the Navy and was lucky to serve in different places throughout the world. Went into healthcare. I was at a law firm, and then went into healthcare compliance after that, and ended up here in Ohio. We thought we'd be here a couple of years. I've now been here 11 years and have loved Ohio. Love doing what I do, but I have to also thank Mike Pizzelli for getting Nick and I together. You're going to hear two, I think, interesting prospects here. You can tell Nick is a very young man, still very good looking and in shape. I've lost the in shape part, but that's okay. But what I like about it is, as you'll hear in a second, is I'm when I graduated, so 83 to 2003, Gulf War, a couple other things, Nicaragua when we were doing things, and honestly, I was in shape back then. And Nick has a great perspective from his time, so I apologize. You know me already, guys. I can talk, so I'm going to be quiet now.
We'll keep moving. Well, thank you, guys. I've told you too, but for the almost 100 people that are listening, you know, we got together to kind of set this up, and we probably could have just pressed record because we had such a great conversation. And I think we were all set to go, but I set another meeting just so, under the guise of work, we could just get together and chat again for a little bit. So we're ready to go here. I've done a lot of sessions and kind of collaborating on events and panels and stuff with Robert in the past. And then I work really closely with Nick over the years, and currently work really closely with him on the National Council on Problem Gambling Prevention Committee, and also the Cuyahoga Problem Gambling Coalition. So it's a treat for me to be able to chat with these two, because we do so much work together outside of this conference. So let's just get right into it, the discussion, right? From your perspective, what is, if there is, the gambling culture inside of the military?
Nick and I kind of talked a little bit. I'm going to give some examples again of 150 years ago when I was with Admiral Dewey and what have you. But for me, you know, different view of life too. Absolutely noticed it when I was in Sasebo, Japan, stationed there at Commander Fleet Activity, Sasebo, Japan. And there was a small little room that joined both the enlisted men's club and the officers club that had slot machines. I'm not a gambler, as I said before, living in Massachusetts and things as before all the casinos came there. It was my first exposure to it. And as an officer, I used to have to watch when they would unload those machines, but I thought, oh, well, they'd probably make a couple $100. And I was absolutely shocked to see the amount of servicemen that were in. They used the money for morale, welfare, and recreation programs. But for me, it was, you don't talk about it. We can get through this. And I'm even sounding gratuitous then. We don't talk about it. Let's get it fixed some way. And it was a bit of a social embarrassment during my time.
Yeah, I'll have to agree. It was, I mean, you have your, I was in the infantry, so, you know, everybody was high risk behavior. It was, you know, high stakes. I remember it wasn't my first choice in all of the high risk behaviors that I was involved in. But it was certainly there from, I mean, from the time that, you know, we all get together. I think there was this atmosphere of like, well, I think this one kid, they were betting him how many, he had bought a box of dipping sticks, you know, where you dip it and you eat it. It's like the candy powdered stuff. And they bet him, I can't remember how much money, if he could eat them all. And he was violently ill. And it was that kind of like stuff happening, like just this kind of culture around, you know, encouraging people to do things that were not quite right. And then also the behind of it, the money of it, of course. So when we were able to go out and be a part of the community, there was a bunch of us who would go to the casino and who would come back with no money. You know, also there was the whole, you know, investing in stocks. These were the guys that were in college, you know, the guys who were, you know, gold, green to gold type guys, and they would, you know, there a lot of money invested into that. And the discussion around that, I did kind of hang out with both different sides. I was in ROTC for about a year. And so I did kind of maneuver my way socially in with them and kind of see. So there was high risk behavior and there was gambling of sorts at all levels. And you're absolutely right, Robert. It wasn't talked about when it got to a certain level. You kind of had to play the political game, and it was much more under wraps. So people who were gaining momentum in their I'll say like kind of in their political career in the military, because it really was, once you went from green to gold, had much more to risk. So that's my experience.
It's kind of interesting too. We were talking about this, and I thought about this last night. Is it more prevalent in one defense department than another? Because I was talking about, I would be out to sea and we'd be out to sea for 80 days. And let's talk Panama. We went into Panama. We didn't know at the time it was a precursor to take a look at when Manuel Noriega, and here we go off, we're out to sea, go straight to the Holiday Inn. There is a casino down there, obviously not regulated like in the United States, and people just spent money. And then we're out to sea and you never gambled. But as I think about it now, as we walked around the ship and what have you, we certainly had poker games inside mess decks and officers' quarters and things of that nature as well. It kind of struck me last night if there was more prevalence in one and why there might be. But
yeah, that was like daily. Anytime there was downtime, the cards were out. And as far as there were the more, I guess, people of color, we would play dominoes, stuff like that. I mean, it was I don't know, it was kind of segregated in the Army, just how people hang out socially.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely there. There was all the time. There's nothing really do yeah. Once everything's clean, if you're not out trained in the infantry, you got to be doing something, so that's really what it was about, or you're working out, one of the two, so
yeah
absolutely.
You can only lift so much.
Yeah, you can only lift so much, you can only run so many times. So
well then, obviously considering gambling, but we'll get more gambling specific in a minute, but just in terms of addiction, mental health support, do veterans or active military know where to turn for support and assistance? Would they? And then, of course, if they wouldn't, what are some of the potential barriers that might keep someone from help-seeking behavior?
And again, and we'll let Nick talk first here in a little bit, but I like to talk because he's hopefully has a little bit brighter of a picture, even if it might be just very little. But my time again, right? So we had a young individual, and I can't remember, Mike and Nick, it was because you and I talked, right? I brought this story up before, but cough mixture in Japan has over the counter as a high content of codeine in it, and you can purchase it. We had a couple of sailors who got addicted on that. One who would steal money orders in the days when we still had money orders at a post office. Another one who turned to gambling there. And it was interesting to see how, I don't know if we understood it more, or if the medical world in the military at that time understood it more, was treated differently. The person who had the codeine addiction would go off and went up to Yokosuka, to a larger military base that had a hospital and could take a look at it. Not the gambling guy. Again, is don't talk about what are you doing? That's ridiculous. How can you have a gambling problem? Yes, it can ruin your family life, promotion, and if you are either gone to a court martial, which I used to do, the punishment is much heavier. But still, if you were administratively separated from the military under an RE4, what's called an RE4 code, other than honorable, it could have devastating consequences when you went to go to get a job.
Yeah, I agree to that as well. I mean, even if, definitely, there's no, you don't want to report anything. This is, you're on all the time. You're on the clock 24 hours a day. So at any point in time, if there is any type of hiccup or blemish, it goes, on your quote unquote permanent record. And even mental health is, it's absolutely against all rules. You don't talk about it,
Mhm.
because there goes your career.
Mhm.
They're still doing that. They still just charge people for having mental health issues, which we all know, inclusion is really part of the cure. And so, uh, yeah, I mean, there was multiple times where, I know I needed help, and other people needed help. And there's just really isn't, I mean, I think it wasn't until some catastrophic things started happening that was there even briefings on who you could report it to. And I mean, most of the time, the guys that you did, that were the guy you went to, you didn't want to talk to anyways, because you didn't, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
it's definitely, it's kind of like sacrificing your career. You would have to sacrifice your career to get help.
Okay, yeah,
And
those barriers, and there's obviously some stigma, and I don't. We'll get to some positivity when we end about how to reach out. I don't want to paint too bleak of a picture, but
yeah,
so gambling addiction, gambling disorder has stigma attached to it. And Robert just mentioned how someone with a coding issue is going to get help and treated differently than someone with a gambling issue. Still looked at as a moral failure and a character deficiency and things like that. We know that there's less screening for gambling problems in the military than other issues. So if you have, stigma of having a gambling problem, a lack of screening, and then also just stigma or barriers for reaching out for support, there seems to be the ability for a lot of gambling issues to emerge unchecked and untreated. So role does stigma play inside of that?
yeah. And I think, Heather's mentioning it kills your clearance as well. You get certain levels of clearance, and you once that happens, unfortunately, you can only go up so high. But to your question, it I'm sorry, Mike. Could you reframe that for me? I
I think I was
apologize.
just the role that stigma, whether it's stigma with addiction or more specifically with a gambling addiction, and then also having a lack of help seeking behaviors, how does that, it's a synergistic effect of problems just emerging unchecked and untreated.
Yeah, it kind of does, but I will say that they do teach a lot of compartmentalization, um, to allow you to kind of forge through some of that. There are amazing qualities the military has given me, and I'm very happy and proud, and that's why I think when Robert said brotherhood, it is a brotherhood, and because we have that ability to just push through, without looking without falling too far into the hole of I can't go any further. Um, that's a great part. But yeah, it does. It's almost like this perfect storm. And I think that anybody that goes through it, um, and I'll reach back into my peer days and talk about some of this stuff. I got in trouble twice, but because I was a good soldier, they put me in for retention. Um, I, uh, I spent a couple years as a private again, but I did what I was supposed to do when I was supposed to do it. I was a loyal soldier, and yeah, but it can be a little draining on you. But I think there's a certain amount of respect in serve when you're serving in the military, and I'll always be proud of that. So
And Nick, I don't mean to make this always sound like this between Nick and I, we have this greatest brotherhood. There's sisterhood too. There's all, but there's just such a uniqueness with the
yes,
military sometimes. The amount of time that we spend together, and I was fortunate to be twice at 2 UN bases. So we had Army, we had Air Force, we had Marines, Coast Guardmen, et cetera there. And a lot of times Navy, and I use Navy because 90% of my career was fantastic, loved it. I'd do it immediately again if I could. And was Jesus, Mary and Joseph. I see I'm off thinking about the military here and kind of got off this, is when you take a certain MOS or a certain deal, like I was a surface warfare officer before I got off into the JAG world. And you're talking about millions of dollars of equipment and the pressure to be promoted, and you want to be promoted to the next rank, because then you get a division, you get individuals underneath you. And there was times, I'm not even talking that I had health problems, but I swallowed. So it would never go on my evaluation. So I'd be promoted. So I'd get a higher rank. So I'd have more responsibilities. And then I'd get there. And now I have to start that cycle back over again. And I can see why individuals might not talk about this very much.
Yeah, and also Heather, I mean, Heather was making another really good point. There has been a lot of improvements, working with a lot of the veterans, there, the things that are happening there, they're sending people for help, they're actually using part of the VA. There's a program now where they send people to the VA if they need it, if they need help, and then they can go back to active duty as a way of, kind of a course of action, where I was sent home and had to pay for my own way for rehabilitation, which was a big difference. Because then I didn't get paid. So at the time that I was gone, I didn't get paid, and I had to pay for my own rehabilitation. Where now they'll still pay you sometimes, but then also you get the free rehabilitation from the VA, which is a great program. So.
And you're right, because I'm looking, and because as we all know, I'm not technologically advanced at all, but I'm looking at the chat now and moved it over. And Heather is right. There has been a lot of movement as I watch this and over the years. And I just want to make sure we understand why I'm talking the way I'm talking, right? I'm giving a perspective of what it was like for me that could be setting as a basis for an individual later in life. Because it's been, if you can believe it, it's been almost 20 years since I retired from the military, and my experience that way. And Mary brought up also, I'd love to meet Mary, because she was apparently up in Yokosuka when I was down in Sasebo, about slot machines on the base and pachinko palace right outside the base, which was their form of gambling in Japan at the time. Although they're trying to make strides to set up gambling there, the Diet, the congressional part of the Japanese political system, has really shunned that for a long time. But I know they're moving more that way.
So, you guys are talking about a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and obviously I think a military veteran population is one of those populations that I'm just saying, but would anticipate, are more likely to, reach out for services or listen to messages from their peers inside the brotherhood and the sisterhood. For us, sports gambling, you've talked about that, the pachinko machines, slot machines, and playing cards on off time and things like that. Obviously, there's a little bit of a culture of that being an activity, and then some folks might develop a problem with it. Sports gambling's coming to Ohio. There's a large emphasis on getting not only more gambling machines and lottery type products, but then also sports gambling inside of places like VFWs and stuff like that. So, it's our duty to reach out and educate folks on that, whether it's training people that are going to be operating things like those machines or sports gambling inside of those types of businesses and clubs and things like that. How do we go about reaching this population and educating them and talking about responsible gambling, and that there are services available for folks who do develop issues? How do we kind of get our foot in the door, if you will? Other than hiring you two to go do it, I suppose.
Yeah. Which I would do.
Which I would do for free.
Okay. Yeah, I would. I really would. It's just make sure it's between the hours of 8 and 5, right? I would think, there's a lot of pride and a lot of culture that goes into VFWs and the halls and all that kind of stuff. But I think if it was approached from the head, the top down, again, leadership, we do follow command. I mean, it's just human nature, but also, and it'd be something to just I think rehabilitation is when there's pride taken in it, when there's an effort saying we have to take care of each other and this is how we do it.
Mhm.
And there are people that are hurting and we have to be mindful of them, is always the most effective. And of course, not shaming, but just saying, like, there's some new rules, there's some new information, let's look at it. It would be the best approach. Now, just putting some statistics and stuff together, also using that, having some more information about instance and scratchers, and also the tabs, pull tabs, because that's really what's there, is the pull tabs and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you, I don't know if you, before I let Robert go, I don't know if you've recorded this yet, but Nick sent me some information to review, and you were going to do a session on gambling in the military, and you had some really, really interesting numbers on the amount that's wagered, but then what each branch like keeps as hold and
Yeah.
whatnot. Has that been created yet, or
Yeah,
if it?
it's being, it's like the last stages of being groomed and edited. So yeah, there's, I think, the last review of it, and then we'll be moving
Okay,
forward
well, yeah,
with that.
send that to us, and then we could get it
Sure.
out to our network, because there's really, really interesting information in there.
Yeah,
About
it's a lot. It's a lot
how
of
we can have a lot
information.
of people view that. Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Robert.
Boy, some really great couple items that picked out there. Technology, I always joke about that. I am not very technologically advanced. We're talking about sports betting. We're talking and being in the industry from a compliance standpoint, looking at what sports betting, we'll look at what we're planning to do with that, and regulatory type of things. In my day in the United States Navy, 150,000 years ago, we didn't have a cell phone. When I was out to sea, I was out to sea. So I couldn't talk to my spouse at that time. 83 days was 83 days. We may get mail every now and then. We didn't have this where I could jump on and play a game or do anything that I wanted to do, what have you. And Mike and they bring that out so well. Technology has changed so much right now. I have a sister-in-law who just left the Navy, and I used to give a hard time, just like my father did with me. Boy, I had to walk to a battle both ways uphill in the snow in my day. She had a cell phone. She could talk to us from overseas. She could play the games, and there will be that aspect of sports betting. If not electronically from a phone in Ohio, look, the other states are going to do it. So that was a really good point, Mike, I wanted to bring up. Nick always talks about not being ashamed. I talk a little bit about that too. That is so important. I'm a stubborn, crusty New Englander. You don't ask for help. You don't do anything of that nature. But I want to bring one experience. I'm pretty much about, look, I'm gay, and I knew I was gay the last 5 years. I was in the military. I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and obey the orders. So I didn't act on it. But when I came out and retired, I struggled with that. And again, I'm doing the Brady Bunch thing because Nick is over on that side, what have you. I had a military buddy who said, talk to a clinician who can help you. I'm like, oh, no, we don't do that. We're out of the military now. And again, this is my experience out of the military now. It took me on. It was the greatest non-shaming experience. I don't know if I got lucky with this clinician or with other people or what have you, but it really helped me to realize who I was and come out, and this weight. I'm like, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, how come I didn't know this before? Because I was a crushed New Englander, and the military said you will not have these type of issues. So we'll talk about it many times, but Lord, I'm serious. I would go to a place, I would talk, I would reach out, I'll pay my own way. I think that PGNO and the other groups that are on here all the time are brilliant in getting the word out. And some person who's by themselves listening to this with the anonymity of the internet, knowing that it's not shameful to do, gosh, I'd love to promote that more.
And you guys are both talking about, there's certain things you say or you don't say, certain things you do or you don't do. But it also sounds like, I mean, and I don't think you two are an outlier, because I know plenty of other people in the military. I mean, it sounds like there is a built-in culture of care where you do care for each other and you do want to have this community of care and balance and support, but there are still some barriers enacted there and erected there. But yeah, obviously doing work with this population is something that I think any type of, whether you call it prevention or education or awareness, you always want to have a representative of that population involved and leading the charge. I mean, it goes anywhere from, the college work we've done. We don't just storm into a college and say, listen to us, we're the experts. We work with student leaders because that message is going to come best from the student leaders. So, if and when, more so when, we try to do more education with the military and veteran population, we'll of course want to have vets involved in whether it's creating the information or delivering the information or both. We're coming on time. So I mean, I want to let you each take a few then moments for some final thoughts, but to create the final thoughts, it was kind of just, what is our field? So the problem gambling field, prevention, treatment, recovery, etc. What does our field need to know about working with this population? What's one thing that we can take home for when we kind of start this work?
So for older individuals like myself, again, I'm 57, and Nick might agree with this too. There is a difference sometimes between enlisted and officers, right? Again, love my military, everything about it. And I'm only pointing out the brown shoes and the black tuxedo right now, but there still is this a little bit of an aristocracy in the military between officers and enlisted. So realize there are some differences that way, how you might approach and talk with them. If I had somebody coming to me and I know it's alone and the confidentiality and no one else is going to talk about it and what have you, much more willing to open up that way. And I think, I think particularly the last 10 years, we're seeing a lot more opening up of these type of talks and expressions and what we see out there. Talk to my Navy friends, veterans and what have you, who suffered under these types of conditions or problems, say that they know it is much easier to reach out to the VA, it's much easier to reach out to individuals. And if any of our people out there that do this every single day, and you guys are brilliant, and that's why I love being on these talks, and you're former military, and give that little hook too, that, hey, I'm former military, love to talk to you about this. That helps me out a great deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for me, I think some of the things I learned, most specifically about veterans, working with veterans in gambling and gaming as well, because we had a lot of people of my generation and younger where gaming was an issue. Gaming was part of their gambling. Was that, this is going to sound weird, but there was the time we were using the biosocial psychospiritual model. Well, now it's moved to the whole health model, but it really was about making connections. It really was about being able to work with other people. That really you could see people start to grow more, the relationships in that, but also that being able to admit to financial situations is very hard, and is also very, very hard for veterans.
Good point, Nick.
Especially on disability. And it's very hard. I mean, even just a normal person, financial literacy is an issue. But for veterans, I think because you're so used to just having money, money saved up or access to money very easily, it can get very, very messy. And it's working with that guilt and that shame is something that can be even heavier on a veteran. So.
Well, that's great information, because I mean, I wouldn't have thought of that. We're always looking at ways to integrate gambling into other information that people might find, more useful or more beneficial. We don't gamble, or our people don't gamble. But what do they have issues with? What's important to them? And then how can we integrate gambling into it? So I wouldn't have thought about, financial literacy as being a hook for that. That gets used in colleges and other places. But that's great information for us.
Just like at colleges where you have certain credit card companies, we see it on the base too, right? You're brand new, you're 19, and as Nick said, you're getting that every 2 weeks. And here's a credit card. By God, have a good time.
Yeah. Here's a credit card, a brand new car. And don't forget about your first divorce. These are things that are very common. I mean, it's guaranteed. By the time you're 22 years old, you've had 2 or 3, Dodge Chargers, and you're an immense amount of debt right off the rip. So and then if you do pick up a gaming or a gambling addiction, or just a regular addiction, there's AOD too, which is it's part of it. It's part of the culture. So yeah, money management is a big part of it, and also. And also there might be a little bit of dodginess with the spirituality part, finding your moral reflections of your morals in the community, and that's what I mean by spirituality. Because there's that pushback to want to connect, or there's them and us when it comes to veterans and civilians. And so that can be kind of crunchy to work with as well. So.
Awesome. Great, guys. Well, we want to make sure that you but then also our attendees do have just a little bit of a break before our next session starts in 12 minutes at 1 o'clock. Thank you very, very much for your thoughts, your professional thoughts, your personal thoughts, for being involved. I look forward to doing one of these again, maybe a little longer. Bringing in Dr. Chapman would be great too, for some treatment thoughts. So yeah, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts and feelings, and I look forward to working with you again soon. Corey, is there something to close us out?
I just want to say thank you so much for your service, for one, and for your perspectives. It really, without making you sound too old, Robert, reminds me of my father, because my father was in the U.S. Navy in 1980, and then reminds me of my older brother as well, who went into the military in 2004, I do believe. So it just resonates with me as kind of like having conversations with my father and my older brother. So I definitely appreciate the perspectives.
Or you could say, yeah, that's the word there. Thank you, Robert, for your historical perspective.
But then I also just want to say that, I really look forward to continuing conversation around this topic and working with you guys and other veterans to make an impact in this, in this realm. So definitely appreciate that.
It's an honor. Thanks for having me, guys.